A unique operation that lasted for months ended with a spectacular explosion in the middle of Donetsk. According to locals, nothing like this has ever been seen before in the occupied territories. Where did it hit? What was destroyed? And most importantly, what did the Ukrainian Armed Forces use?
Judging by the special effects and the massive explosions, Flamingo missiles were used.
So let's go through everything step by step. The night before, a powerful explosion rocked Donetsk, after which, according to eyewitness videos, a fireball rose into the sky resembling a nuclear mushroom cloud, and windows were blown out in buildings several kilometers from the epicenter.
The windows were shattered. In fact, this is the area of the Oktyabrski airport. A large ammunition depot, missiles hit there. There is no official information yet, but people are already talking about an ammunition depot. I watched the video. It's spectacular. Most likely it really was a very large missile or shell depot, because in the video, the explosion looks like something out of a sci-fi movie or a computer game. And then there was a second explosion. You can clearly see this glowing, rapidly expanding shockwave. In other words, the strike hit the Donetsk depots very successfully.
A bit later, the head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces drone systems, Robert Magyar Brudi, clarified the situation. According to his information, the strike hit a large depot of Shahed-type drones where warheads were also stored.
Tracking down this complex target turned into a painstaking intelligence operation lasting several months, pieced together from small fragments. Last night, it was struck by appropriate means deployed by the Special Operations Forces and the missile troops of the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
Analysts note that despite the Shahed's long flight range, it was extremely important for the Russians to keep the drone depot close to the front line. After all, when the occupiers launch UAVs just a few dozen kilometers from the line of contact, the Ukrainian Armed Forces simply do not have time to respond quickly. As a result, the drones carry out their terror in frontline cities and also strike at forward positions.
Of our soldiers, who have shown remarkable courage and dedication in the face of adversity, but despite their unwavering commitment and the sacrifices they have made.
What exactly the defense forces used, our command preferred not to disclose. One thing is certain, drones definitely took part in the attack, but something else followed them as well.
As far as we can tell, they were distracting the local air defense. But the decisive strike was delivered by something resembling a rocket. It could have been a drone or possibly a missile. And
the fact that missiles were indeed used is also supported by Magyar's reports about the participation of Ukraine's missile forces in the attack.
I don't think the warehouse with Shaheds was unprotected, that it was just some hangars. Most likely not. It was probably some kind of underground bunker. And that's another reason why I think these were flobbings. Of course, they could have used Storm Shadow as well. Storm Shadow would have worked here too. They have a bunker busting capability. Nevertheless, the scale of the detonation shows that, at least it seems to me, if you look at the first second, the explosion was clearly bigger than just a couple 100 kilograms of a Storm Shadow warhead.
So yes, most likely these were our Ukrainian Flamingos. By the way, this is already the third time just this week that they've inflicted colossal damage on the Russians. But in Crimea, such power wasn't needed, so drones were sent to attack the peninsula. In occupied Simferopol, around 2:30 in the morning, a fire broke out at an oil depot. Presumably, this refers to Krimneftesbit in the area of the village of Bitumnoye. There were also reports of 4 strikes in Gvardeyskoye, after which smoke rose into the sky. There, the hits likely struck the local thermal power plant, which temporarily ceased operations. Distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers are no obstacle for Ukrainian weaponry. Russian oil refineries,
Well, that's it. It's obvious. The plant is fucked. That's clear even without saying it.
key facilities of the military-industrial complex and the Russian war machine. In general,
It's a nightmare. It's getting worse. And
recently, in response to the ongoing shelling of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, Ukrainian forces have also started targeting critical infrastructure in Russia.
there is absolutely no way that could ever happen. Not in a million years. Very, wow, would you look at that? Now that's truly an incredible attraction.
When the Kremlin threatens Ukrainians with blackouts, Russians should also prepare for a cold and harsh winter. If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
For a long time, Western allies restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory, as a result of which Ukraine expanded its own long-range arsenal. According to the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, today 99% of strikes on Russian oil refineries are carried out with Ukrainian weapons.
At the time when all this began, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your opinion that this is the correct interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own production, and it is precisely our domestic production that has given us the ability to use our forces and resources as we see fit.
The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and defense industry. In particular, the domestic production of long-range drones and missiles with which Ukraine regularly strikes targets in Russia located thousands of kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their aviation. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at Russia's military-industrial enterprises and energy system. This is Belgorod, basically. There's no damn electricity anywhere in Belgorod.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
If the simplest drones to manufacture are used for strikes on Russian oil refineries, jet-powered drones like Polyanity, Peklo, and Bars are better suited for targeting military-industrial facilities. Their technical specifications are not disclosed. Experts suggest that the range of these jet-powered drones is between 500 and 700 kilometers. The main advantage is their low cost compared to cruise missile competitors.
Cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which are the most protected by the Russian Federation's air defense systems, could start getting hit every evening. Bars can reach those cities, and I believe this should happen in a systematic and organized manner.
For dessert, Ukrainian long-range missiles are in store for the occupiers. The long-range Neptunes and Flamingos have ranges of 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers, respectively. The Ukrainian Pink Bird impresses not only with its enormous range, but also with a warhead weighing about 1,000 kilograms.
Usually, the warhead of a modern cruise missile weighs 450, at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450-kilogram warhead. What does a one-ton warhead provide? If such a missile hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 of these missiles can completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists who are shelling Ukrainian cities must understand a mirrored response is inevitable.
After a long, difficult, and arduous and exhausting journey, Crimea and Sevastopol are returning to their home harbor.
And that harbor is Ukraine. Crimea is being cut off from the Russian Federation, and the collapse of the Crimean bridge is just a matter of time. This is what Western publications are reporting. There is already a total fuel crisis on the peninsula. Some areas have been left without electricity. There isn't enough air defense even for the most important sites. And those that remain in the chaos are now shooting down their own planes.
We note that as a military base, Crimea is becoming more and more inconvenient for Russia. And also because there is no water.
The past few days have marked a new reality of life on the peninsula. The key event was a series of strikes in the area of Hovardiske, where after precise hits, the largest oil depot in the region caught fire. According to locals, the burning depot in Vardiiska could be seen from the suburbs of Simferopol, with the glow visible for many kilometers. In
Vardiiska, there was a strike not only on the oil depot, but also on the military airfield, and also on the Russian garrison located there. According
to information circulating online, an ammunition depot on the garrison's territory was also hit. In addition, the oil depot near Feodosia has also partially ceased operations. Due to several attacks just this month, 11 fuel tanks have been completely destroyed, as confirmed by satellite images.
Regarding the Odessa oil depot, why is this a very important story? Because it didn't just burn down on its own. It burned down along with the fuel that was stored in those tanks. And it will be very difficult to restore this. It's not clear what was stored there. Diesel fuel or gasoline. But if it was gasoline, which is most likely, it means that the crisis this week in occupied Crimea will be much worse than it was the week before. So we wait.
At the same time, each such strike is notable for the fact that it's almost impossible to extinguish the fire. Experts say that the burning fuel spreads across the facility, igniting neighboring tanks. And so the fire can go on for days.
The landscapes of Feodosia adorn almost the entire eastern part of Crimea. They say the flames can be seen from 30 and in some places even 50 kilometers away. Everything, they say, is burning to the ground. The facility needs to be shut down. This is a recommendation for the occupying Crimean authorities, who have also confirmed that there will be no gasoline.
There will be no diesel either, local authorities add. Local activists report that since the beginning of the week, diesel fuel has also disappeared in Crimea. Under these circumstances, the promise of the head of the occupying Crimean administration, Sergei Aksyonov, to stabilize the fuel supply situation is simply impossible to fulfill, added Z propagandist Alexander Sergeyev. At the same time, the authorities are desperately trying to conceal the real picture of what is happening in Crimea. Thus, just over the past weekend, police officers drew up at least 4 administrative reports against residents of the peninsula for posts on social media. People in particular were outraged by the lack of fuel. Interestingly, Russians themselves are partly helping the Ukrainian Armed Forces to identify targets in Crimea. Experts have analyzed that now these targets can be found simply by opening maps on the internet.
Remember when Yandex.Maps started blurring all sorts of strategic sites? I said that now it's absolutely clear where exactly to strike. Well, my friends from Inform-Napalm noticed that the Special Operations Forces did exactly that. The territory of the oil depot in Vardiiska was blurred on Yandex, but for some reason that didn't help against the strikes. It's a mystery. Once again, thanks to all the Russian decisions that help increase the effectiveness of Ukrainian strikes. Blurring military sites on Yandex Maps is definitely one of them.
Another decision that has contributed to the regular strikes in Crimea is the work of the defense forces targeting Russian air defense sites on the peninsula. Just recently, the main intelligence directorate was able to strike the occupiers' newest radar system. We're talking about the Valday complex, which was developed to detect small drones.
The security service of Ukraine continues to systematically reduce the enemy's military, logistical, and economic capabilities to do anything both in occupied Crimea, in other occupied territories, and even on Russian territory itself. But Crimea suffers the most because the air defense system there was deliberately destroyed. Their ability to defend themselves was reduced, and now we are working as if inside the body.
By the way, so that the occupiers in Crimea don't get the impression that everything will go back to normal along with the oil depots and military equipment, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have not forgotten about the equipment that supplies electricity to the Russian bases. In several regions of the peninsula, Ukrainian defenders organize blackouts.
several electrical substations in Crimea were put out of commission overnight. In particular, the main power substation in Jankoy, or Jankong as we used to call it in Crimea, was affected. So now rolling power outages are being implemented. And here once again Putin is being shown in very concrete terms that if he continues to strike at Ukraine's energy infrastructure, the occupiers in Crimea will be left without electricity and fuel.
And now the cherry on top. During one of the latest attacks, the Russian air defense crews got so nervous that they started firing at everything in sight. As a result, one less Russian fighter jet, worth about $50 million.
During a nighttime attack by Ukrainian drones, Russian forces shot down their own Su-30SM aircraft. This happened right in the area of the Gvardeyskoye airfield.
At the same time, there's no positive outlook for the occupiers when it comes to air defense. Analysts note that recently there have been more strikes on Russian territory itself, prompting a decision to partially redeploy air defense systems from Crimea back to Russia for protection.